Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Review. I'm Phil Hargis. It's good to see you guys again. We got through our first round of wild card games. There were some great games, and there were some really not so great games. The game we started off with, I mean, the Saturday games were really the best. We got to start off there with it was probably the best game of the week, with Seattle going in there and beating up on New Orleans 41-36, in a game that really nobody gave Seattle a chance of even being able to keep that one close. They proved everybody wrong, like we kind of said on the show last week. It's really going to be tough for New Orleans to fly across the country on the short week and then just be a competitive team there on the Saturday game. And then later on that night, we saw the New York Jets with that last-second drive come by and beat Indianapolis. And then on Sunday, we had the blowout with Baltimore over Kansas City. And then what ended up being sort of anticlimactic and should have been the best game of the week, Green Bay took down Philadelphia 21-16 in a game that many people thought Green Bay could kind of pull the upset there. But anyway, we have another round of exciting games to go over with. So let's introduce Robbie Castro. Robbie Castro is a co-host. Robbie, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, as you, Phil. Good to see you. Good to be back in the studio. It's been like, what? We haven't been here since, this is the first time we've been here this year.
That's right, man. Happy New Year. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and all that good stuff. Was Santa Claus good to you?
Always.
He was.
Always.
So you were a good boy last year, huh?
I wouldn't say that, but I mean.
You did pretty well fantasy-wise, though.
I did great fantasy-wise. You bashed me all year, and I kind of took that into account, and I think it made my team a lot better.
And we have a special blonde bombshell here joining us in studio today. This is Clara Markowski. Clara, welcome to Fantasy Sports Review.
Hi, thank you guys so much. I'm glad to be here.
Now, Clara has been talking to me about football all season long. She knows a lot of stuff. She's a huge Redskin fan. But Clara, you sound to me like you're kind of a pro and you know a lot about football and fantasy football. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your football resume?
Sure. Well, I do. It's my absolute passion. I love football so much, and I definitely owe that to my dad. My dad is born and raised in Philly, so he is definitely a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I know. And when I was 5 years old, I was like, you know what, Dad? I'm going to be a Redskins fan. So ever since then, I followed the Redskins. And then about 5 years ago, he kind of got me into fantasy football, and I absolutely love it. It makes the season so interesting. It's so entertaining. I love following my guys. And it's great because when the Redskins aren't playing, you watch all the guys and you watch all those games, and it's awesome. You root for players, you root for quarterback. It's a lot of fun.
So your dad got you into fantasy football. That's interesting. So now, did you guys share a team, or did he bring you in to compete against him in the league, or how did that go down?
He brought me in to play against him. Every year I do a family league, and then I do a league with where I work. And the family league is about 8 people. And we all play against each other, and then the other team's about 12 people. And I'm always on my own team.
That's good.
And I love it.
And did he beat your dad, or does he beat you? Or?
This year, he got first, and I got second. It was the first year that I came close. But
an all-family final.
All-family final, yeah. And he got first. I was a little irritated about that, but I finished second, so I was pretty happy about that.
And now, did you beat Dave Fusco? I know Dave is one of our mutual friends. Did you beat him in fantasy football in the work league there, or how did that play out?
Actually, it was a league with Sweetwater Tavern.
Oh, okay. So different.
And he wasn't in the league, but Fusco and I, we always talked. And we compared. We're like, oh, I have this guy going this week, and oh, I'm starting Deshaun Jackson. Oh, I just picked up Sidney Rice and Deion Branch. I'm all excited about that. So we talked a lot about
So who knows more, you or Dave, about football?
I'm going to say me.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm going to say me.
I'll have to take that up with Fusco there. He might have something else to say. But Robbie, it's been a wild year for fantasy football. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, but I really want to pick Clara's brains here and see what she thinks about this past fantasy football season. What are some of the top things that come to your mind for this past season that we just went through?
Quarterbacks. Quarterbacks were crazy. Tom Brady, definitely. I can't believe he's actually number 5 on the list. I would have thought he was up there. Aaron Rodgers, definitely. Green Bay struggled a little bit, but they got lucky and they made the wild card, and then they did awesome by beating the Eagles, and now they're up against Atlanta.
Green Bay is up against Atlanta. That's correct.
Atlanta's a tough team to beat, definitely. Phillip Rivers, I was really rooting for San Diego. I really was. I really like San Diego. I love their defense. I actually had them in one of my leagues as my defense. Phillip Rivers is great. He's always a clutch quarterback. And then, of course, the Michael Vick. Michael Vick. You hate him, but you love him, and everybody had Eagles going all the way. But I mean, and either if you owe that game to David Akers by missing the 2 field goals, or it's, Michael Vick by getting the pressure put on him. But I mean, Michael Vick definitely turned a lot of heads, and he definitely, you know, he proved his point. And I know Andy Reid was happy with him. He'll be an Eagle for a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting because he is a free agent this year, right, Robbie? And he could be up for signing by any team, to my understanding.
I think he's going to stay in Philadelphia because they gave him a chance to, you know, compete for the starting job this season. But like Claire just said, I mean, Philadelphia all year long was to talk about Michael Vick becoming an MVP candidate, and he did. And he showed it. He missed a few games in the middle of the season, but came on strong towards the end. Now, the biggest thing that I saw in that Packers game was that, you know, the constant pressure put on him. And if you do pressure Vick, you know, if he's got to scramble, he's going to make throws outside the pocket. That's, you know, that's his big time weakness. So if you can, as a defense, do that, you know, put pressure on Michael, like we were talking about, you know, good things will happen. And he did get forced in throwing that interception, but it really wasn't his fault. You can't blame that game on him because, you know, he took that whole entire team pretty much on top of their shoulders, led them to a, you know, division title, and then also, you know, let them against the Green Bay Packers. They did. Now, they were everyone's favorite to win to win in the NFC this season, but didn't hold true. And I kind of picked the Packers. I said whoever wins this game is going to go into the Super Bowl because, you know, those two teams right there matched up in the first round. That was the toughest. I think it's the toughest opponent anyone could face in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay has played Atlanta earlier, as we'll get into later, and played them pretty tight. You know, I just think that Philadelphia went out with the wrong game plan in that one. They needed to make LaShawn McCoy a bigger part of that game, and they really didn't, I don't think. So running back wise, how'd you make our running back wise?
Running back. You know, when I first, you know, started fantasy this year, who was Arian Foster and who was Peyton Hillis? You know, they were definitely the surprise of the season. And I had first-round pick, and I picked Adrian Peterson, which was a good pick. But, you know, Arian Foster and Peyton Hillis come out of nowhere. Both of them were not even – they were picked up by a lot of people in my league, you know, as the
free agent wire, the waiver wire.
And Peyton Hillis is a monster, and you know, Cleveland was horrible last year, and they definitely owe that a lot to Peyton Hillis because he was just a monster.
Yeah, and especially being like third on the depth chart, they lost Montario Hardesty, I think Jerome Harrison, not whatever that guy's name.
Jerome Harrison.
Jerome Harrison. He got hurt, and you know, so everybody thinks he sees Peyton Hillis stepping in. There's like, can the guy that's third on the Cleveland Browns running depth chart actually have any success? And you know, and obviously he went on to have tons of success. Both of those players, including Adrian Peterson, kind of let their teams down in fantasy Super Bowls and fantasy semifinals. They had bad weeks. Adrian Peterson was like a game time scratch in week 15, you know, and that Tuesday night snow game.
That hurt me. Yeah, I remember. Yep.
It's a killer. It was an absolute killer to anybody that had Adrian Peterson. And then, you know, Chris Johnson is a guy that we've talked about, you know, at the start of the season. That we said there's just no way this guy should be the #1 overall draft pick. He's getting drafted as the #1 overall consensus #1 pick, and it's just too hard to follow up a season like he had last season to do it again. Now he'll probably bounce back and be the #1 or 2 guy next year, but it's just so hard to follow up a season like that. And one guy I was glad to see make a comeback this year was was Matt Fort. Over there in Chicago. I mean, that guy was good as a rookie. Kind of had an off year, a sophomore slump last year, and then came back and put up those numbers on what's ended up being a pretty competitive Chicago Bears team. That's you know, obviously one of the top contenders in the NFC there. So let's move on to the wide receivers, you guys. I mean, this was kind of a crazy year for wide receivers, and the fact that a guy that was basically undrafted ends up being your #1 guy there, Brandon Lloyd.
Yeah, that was and we were talking about this before the show. Brandon Lloyd. I mean, you know, no one could have seen this coming because when he played for Chicago and Washington, I mean, this guy was pretty much non-existent. All the game plans. Dwayne Bowe and Roddy White. I mean, Dwayne Bowe, kind of a coin flip. I mean, you don't know where to take this guy. Should you draft him, you know, in the 3rd or 4th round, or should you wait to like the 7th or 8th round to get this guy? Because, you know, Matt Castle last season proved without an offensive line he can do any damage in Kansas City. But Dwayne Bowe, I mean, he's a heck of a talent. Probably go in the top 2 rounds in next year's fantasy draft, along with Roddy White. Then you look at Mike Wallace and Greg Jennings. Both those guys are deep threats, so they pose big numbers week in and week out.
Yeah, so Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about your strategy when you're drafting wide receivers in the draft? Are those guys you like try to draft early in the draft? You'd like to wait until middle rounds, late rounds, try to catch the sleepers, or you just wait and try to pick them up on the waiver wires?
Well, the thing what I do, there's a lot of wide receivers. And, you know, wide receivers, I do not generally draft. I usually wait about the 4th or 5th round to get a couple of good wide receivers. But, I mean, yeah, the list. I'm not surprised here at all. Brandon Lloyd, fabulous. And it's just such a shame that Denver did so horribly this year. And then Dwayne Bowe, I mean, in sync with Matt Castle. Roddy White was fabulous last year. I had him on my team last year, and Roddy White was awesome. But I usually do running backs and quarterbacks before I go with a wide receiver. And a lot of times in leagues, wide receivers stand out that aren't picked generally first, and they'll come out with an awesome season, and then you can pick them up.
Yeah, I mean, plus there's guys will be like highly ranked, like Randy Moss, and won't even make the top 12 list. I mean, that was just a ridiculous pick this year, as it turned out. I mean, just Randy Moss has completely fallen off the fantasy football radar, which is kind of sad.
It's such a shame because he was awesome. I mean, he was ranked like 5th. I remember he was ranked 5th overall, and you know, the 1st or 2nd wide receiver going into the fantasy football this year. And it's really a shame because Randy Moss was an awesome fantasy player.
He was, and probably never will be again, as far as I can see. I mean, now that he's kind of washed in the black hole of Tennessee there. You know, another big surprise on this list is Mike Williams, Tampa Bay, and actually Mike Williams. Both of the Mike Williams in Seattle both turned out to be tremendous football players, really out of nowhere. Just goes to show you that the waiver wire can be you have to pay attention to the waiver wire for wide receivers and take your chances on these guys early in the season, because you do. I mean, Steve Johnson, Robbie and I have said it a million times on the show. Just really what a fantastic pickup he was for the waiver wire. And now tight ends, Claire, this is something that Robbie and I have a very strong opinion on, like going for each year in the draft, like when to draft a tight end. Are you one of those gals that goes after a tight end like an Antonio Gates or Dallas Clark in the early rounds, like in the 4th or the 5th, or do you say the hell with tight ends and like get one at the end of the draft?
I get him in the middle.
You get him in the middle?
I say I get a running back, and then maybe my quarterback, then another running back, and then I do a wide receiver, and then I get a tight end.
Okay, so you stock up on a tight end. So who was the tight end on your team this year?
Tony Gonzalez.
Tony Gonzalez. Okay, so you drafted Tony Gonzalez in the 5th or the 6th round, okay? Let me tell you why that's a mistake. Look at this list of tight ends right here. You can see guys like Mercedes Lewis, Rob Gronkowski, Kellen Winslow, Chris Cooley here in Washington, D.C., Dustin Keller, Zach Miller, Aaron Hernandez, or Brandon Pettigrew, all undrafted. You could probably get any one of those, or drafted late in their draft. So you don't want to be taking tight ends that early. That's one little nugget we'd like to leave you with for next season. Go home, jot that one down. Remember that. You don't need to take a tight end until very late in the draft, if at all. So anyway, we do have a news and weather segment. Amanda's standing by in the weather center. She's going to be sort of being dual-hatted today. She's got some previews of the games coming up this weekend for the NFL playoffs, and she's also got some exciting weather for the 3 games that are being played outside. So Amanda, please go and take us away with the weather.